He called me at 7:02 in the morning. I was asleep upstairs. I didn't hear it ring. By the time I came downstairs 2 hours later, he was gone. Still sitting in his chair by the window, his coffee warm on the side table, his bird notebook open in his lap. And in the center of the fresh page, in its careful handwriting, was one word: my name. I didn't find the voicemail until 4 days after we buried him. And when I finally heard his voice come through that phone speaker, warm, unhurried, completely unaware that he had less than an hour left to live, I sat down on his side of the bed for the first time in 41 years of marriage, and I did not get up for a very long time. My name is Dorothy Caldwell. I am 77 years old. I have folded my husband's uniforms for the last time, cleared his coffee cup from the counter, and packed 41 years of our life together into 14 cardboard boxes that now sit in my son's garage because I cannot bring myself to open them. I have sat in a front pew and listened to good people call Raymond a good man, and they were right, every last one of them, while I held a secret in my chest that none of them knew. I had that good man for 41 years, and I spent most of them pushing him away, so slowly, so quietly, that neither one of us fully understood what was happening until it was already done. I am telling you this story not because it flatters me, not because I want your sympathy or your forgiveness. I am telling you this because somewhere out there right now, someone is doing exactly what I did, pulling back, going silent, choosing the cold safety of pride over the terrifying warmth of being truly known, building walls so carefully and so gradually that they mistake them for strength. They still have time to stop. I didn't know that I didn't, and that is the thing that will follow me for whatever years I have left. We met in the spring of 1983 at a church fish fry in Macon, Georgia. One of those long southern evenings where the air smells like sweet potato pie and fresh cut grass, and everything moves slow and easy like the whole world has decided to breathe. Raymond Earl Caldwell was standing near the back wall in his army dress uniform on a Saturday afternoon at a church social because Raymond did not know how to be casual about anything he respected. He was broad across the shoulders with steady hands and the kind of quiet eyes that made you feel like whatever you were about to say actually mattered to someone for the first time in a long while. He walked over with a paper plate and said 4 words. "You dropped your napkin, ma'am." I hadn't dropped a thing. He just needed a reason to come close. I thought about those 4 words for weeks afterward, the softness hiding inside them, the effort. A man who could have opened with anything chose something gentle, something that gave me a choice and didn't demand anything back. He left the door open and waited on the other side of it like he had all the time in the world. I smiled. He smiled. And something shifted in the air between us that neither one of us could have named, but both of us felt. I married him 11 months later in my mother's backyard under a rented white tent. The flowers came from a grocery store because a florist was beyond our budget. My dress was ivory, not white, and my shoes pinched by the second hour, and the microphone kept cutting out during the vows. None of it mattered, not one detail of it registered, because Raymond Earls Caldwell stood at that altar and wept. Not one polite tear, the kind of crying that moves through a man's whole chest while he fights with everything he has not to come apart in front of everyone who loves him. He lost that fight completely the moment I appeared at the end of that aisle, and every woman in that yard, every single one, loved him for it. I loved him for it too. For a few years, we were the couple people pointed at, the ones people said, "Look at them. Look at how they still look at each other." Then the army took him and kept taking him. Desert Storm, extended overseas tours, training rotations that stretched from 6 weeks into 4 months without warning. He called when he could, which was never often enough, and the calls were short and filled with static and never said the things I needed to hear. Because Raymond was not a man who knew how to be soft over a phone line with soldiers moving around him in the background. Because the army had spent years teaching him that softness in the wrong moment cost lives, and he had not yet learned that there were moments when the cost of hardness was just as high. I raised our son Marcus through most of his childhood alone. I learned to fix a leaking pipe at midnight with a YouTube video and a prayer. I learned to negotiate with landlords who spoke to me like my husband's absence made me lesser. I sat in the front row of school plays and soccer games and parent-teacher conferences with an empty seat beside me that I saved the first 2 years and stopped saving after the third because saving it had started to feel like hope I couldn't afford. I made 2 plates for dinner some evenings, purely out of habit, then stood at the kitchen counter eating mine alone, watching the other one go cold across the table, telling myself it didn't hurt as much as it did. When Raymond came home each time, I wanted to fall into him, every single time. Wanted to set down everything I'd been carrying and just rest for a moment inside the fact that he was back and we were whole again. But something always stopped me. He was different each time. Not broken, never broken, just quietly rearranged, like furniture moved 2 inches in the dark. You don't fall over it, but you always bump it. And after enough years of bumping the same furniture in the dark, you stop reaching out altogether and just learn to walk around it. He never once talked about what he saw overseas. Not to me, not to Marcus, not to his army brothers when they came to visit. Whatever he brought home from those places, he sealed inside himself with the same discipline he brought to everything else. And I did not push because I told myself I was giving him space. The truth was, I was exhausted. I had been carrying everything alone for years, and when he finally came through the door, I did not know how to hand it down without also handing him the resentment that had been quietly growing underneath it like a root beneath concrete. So I kept carrying, and my arms forgot what it felt like to reach. That was the beginning of the end, and it did not look like an ending at all. It looked like a Tuesday evening. It looked like nothing. By the time Marcus left for college, Raymond and I had become something I still struggle to name. Not enemies, not strangers exactly, something lonelier than both. 2 people who knew each other completely and had chosen, in small ways every day for years, not to act on that knowledge. We moved through the same house, sat at the same table, slept in the same bed, and lived in entirely separate worlds that occasionally, briefly touched at the edges. He tried. I need you to understand that Raymond tried in every quiet way a man like him knew how. He fixed things before I noticed they needed fixing. The porch step that creaked, the kitchen drawer that stuck every winter, the bathroom faucet that dripped at 3 a.m. He left my coffee on the counter every single morning for 41 years without exception. 2 sugars, a splash of cream, stirred clockwise because that is how I liked it, which sounds like a small thing until you consider that he remembered it across deployments and arguments and decades and years of me barely looking at him. And he never once got it wrong and never once mentioned that he remembered. On Sunday afternoons, he would appear in a doorway of whatever room I was sitting in and just stand there for a moment. Not asking, not speaking, those steady eyes of his just resting on me, checking that I was still there, still present, still somewhere inside the marriage, even if I was far from its center. I never looked up from my book, not once, not in all those years. I think about those doorway moments now, and they reach inside me and hollow me out completely. One evening, gray October rain against the windows, the kind of rain that makes a house feel both smaller and lonelier, he set his fork down very carefully at the dinner table, folded his hands the way he always did when he was about to say something that cost him something, and said in the quietest voice I had ever heard from him, "Dorothy, are we okay?" Something rose in my chest in that moment, something that had been pressing against the inside of my ribs for years, wanting out. I looked at this man across the table, the man who cried at our altar, who called when he could from places I couldn't find on a map, who fixed things in the dark and made my coffee every morning and stood in doorways hoping I would look up. And I said, "Of course we are. Why do you always do this?" He nodded once, slowly, picked up his fork, finished his dinner without another word, and never asked again. That was 2009. He spent the next 14 years believing the answer I gave him, and I spent those same 14 years telling myself I had done nothing wrong, while somewhere underneath that, in a place I refused to visit, I knew exactly what I had done. In 2019, the doctor told us Raymond's heart was weakening. Manageable with the right care, medication, monitoring, regular checkups, some changes to how he lived. The doctor spoke carefully and clearly, and Raymond listened with his hands folded on his knees, asked 2 precise questions, thanked the doctor by name on the way out the door. He told me at the kitchen table that same evening, fork down, hands folded, eyes steady, delivering the news the way soldiers deliver reports, plainly, without theater, without asking for more than you can give. I said, "Okay, we'll handle it." I stood up and cleared the plates. What was rising inside me in that moment, what I pressed down with both hands and refused to release, was something that had no pride left in it at all. Pure fear, raw and animal and honest in a way I had not allowed myself to be in years. I am not ready. I am not ready for you to leave. I know I have kept you at a distance for so long that I don't know how to explain why, but please, please don't go before I find my way back to you. I said none of it. And Raymond Caldwell, the man who had wept openly at our wedding in front of God and everyone who loved us, sat alone at that kitchen table for a long time in the quiet I left behind before he finally pushed back his chair and stood up. Then the pandemic came and sealed us inside that house together with nowhere to hide, no errands to manufacture as excuses, no Marcus flying in for the holidays to fill the silence between us with his laugh and his stories and his easy way of making his father and me feel like a unit. No church, no neighbors, no coffees with friends where we could perform the version of ourselves we showed the world. Just Raymond and me and 41 years of everything we had never said, pressing against the walls of every room. It terrified me. I will not pretend otherwise. But then Raymond started doing something I had not seen coming. Every evening around sunset, he would carry 2 lawn chairs out to the back porch. Old, faded green ones we had bought at a hardware store sale in 1991. One armrest held together with silver duct tape from a crack we always said we'd replace and never did. He would set a glass of sweet tea on the little wooden table between the chairs. Then he would sit in his chair, fold his hands in his lap, and wait. He never called for me, never knocked, never asked. He simply created the space and left the invitation open, the way he had been doing in doorways for 20 years without a single acknowledgement from me. The first week, I stayed inside, watched him through the kitchen window sometimes, told myself he was fine out there alone. The second week, I went once, told myself it was just for the air. The third week, I went every evening before he had even had the chair set up. I did not decide to, I just went. We did not talk much at first. We sat, we watched the light leave the yard in slow stages, gold to orange to a soft blue-gray that made everything look gentle. We listened to the wind chimes 3 houses down and the occasional car on the road and the birds moving through the trees before dark. And something was happening between us in that silence that I did not have words for yet. Something I had not felt in decades. The armor was thinning, not gone, not yet, but growing thin enough that warmth was starting to come through it in places. One evening in October, without turning to look at me, Raymond said very softly, "I missed you, Dorothy, even when you were right here sitting beside me every single day. I missed you for a very long time." I sat with those words, let them move through me the way water moves through dry ground, slowly finding every crack. I did not answer him that night, but I stopped going to bed before him. And when his hand found mine on the armrest between our chairs, I did not pull away. I let it stay. And after a few minutes, I turned my hand over so that my palm was against his. That was the closest I ever came to saying everything I should have said in that kitchen in 2009. I know, I missed myself too. I built walls and called them strength, and they kept out everything I actually needed. I am so sorry it took me this long to find my way back to you. By 2023, something had settled between us that I had no word for except this: peace. Not the fire of new love. We were in our late 70s, long past the season of fire. Something quieter and more durable. The steady warmth of embers after a very long night, which is its own kind of beautiful if you are still alive to feel it. Raymond had taken up bird watching. He kept a small green notebook where he sketched each bird in his precise handwriting: species, date, exact location, what the light was like, and what the temperature felt like on his skin. He brought the same seriousness to bird watching that he had brought to everything he had ever respected. He started showing me the pages in the evenings on the porch. I started asking questions. Real ones. Where does that one go in winter? How does it know when to leave? Does it come back to the same branch every year? And Raymond would look at me the way he used to look at me across my mother's backyard in 1983. Like whatever I had just said was exactly what he had been hoping to hear. And he would answer every question like it was the most alive conversation he had had in years. We were almost there. After 41 years, I could feel the distance finally closing, like a door swinging gently shut on everything cold that had lived between us for so long. We were almost back, almost whole. Then on a Thursday morning in March, Raymond woke before dawn the way he always had. He moved quietly through the house so as not to wake me. He made my coffee, 2 sugars, a splash of cream, and left it on the counter where I would find it. He carried his own cup to the chair by the window. He opened his bird notebook to a fresh page. He picked up his pen. And somewhere in the space between one breath and the next, without a sound, without a word, his heart simply stopped. When I came downstairs at 7:15, the coffee was still warm on the counter. The house was completely quiet. And in his chair by the window, Raymond sat exactly as he had every morning for years. Still, peaceful, his notebook open on his lap. I spoke his name once. Then I knew. I looked at the notebook, at the fresh page, at the single word in the center of it in his careful handwriting. Dorothy. Just my name. Nothing else. No sentence begun beneath it, no explanation, no context. Just my name on a blank page in the last moment of his life. To this day, I do not know if it was the beginning of something he had been meaning to write for years, or simply the word that lived closest to his heart when everything stopped. To this day, that single word on that single page is the thing that reaches deepest inside me on the nights when the house is quiet and long and the other side of the bed has been cold for 1.5 years. I found his voicemail 4 days after the funeral. The phone had not stopped ringing. Marcus from Denver, my sister from Atlanta, church ladies, Raymond's army brothers calling from Texas and North Carolina, and places I had never been. I had been letting everything go to voicemail, existing in that hollow, muffled state that grief wraps around you in the early days, where sounds come from somewhere far away and your own hands feel unfamiliar. On the 4th night, when the silence in the house became the kind that has weight, I finally picked up the phone and scrolled back. 7:02 a.m., the morning he died. His name on the screen. He had called me while I was still asleep upstairs. I had not heard it ring. He had left the message, and I had carried that phone for 4 days through the funeral and the burial and the reception and the long empty evenings without ever knowing it was there. My hand shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I sat down on the edge of the bed, his side, the right side, the side with the lamp he kept dimmed because the light bothered his eyes at night, the side I had never once slept on in 41 years of marriage. I pressed the phone to my ear. I held my breath. His voice came through the speaker like he was standing right there in the room. "Dorothy, it's me. Don't worry, nothing's wrong." A breath. The quiet of the house around him. "I made your coffee, and I was sitting here looking out at the yard, and I saw a yellow warbler on the fence post. First one this year. Beautiful little thing. I wrote it down." A pause, long enough that I could hear him smiling. "I was going to come upstairs and wake you to tell you, but I didn't want to disturb you. You looked so peaceful when I checked in on you." Another pause. His voice dropped lower, softer. "I just wanted to say, these last few years have been the best ones, Dot. The very best ones of my whole life. I know we lost a lot of time getting here, but what we found at the end of it, I wouldn't trade it for anything this world has to give." A breath. "I love you, Dorothy. I'll see you when you come down." The message ended. I sat on his side of the bed with the phone pressed against my chest, and I could not breathe. I could not speak. I could not make a single sound. The grief that moved through me in that moment was not only for Raymond, it was for every doorway I never looked up at, every hand I pulled back, every "are we okay?" I shut down before it could cost me anything. Every year, I chose the cold, familiar safety of my walls over the unbearable, terrifying risk of being fully known by the man who had never stopped trying to know me. He called me Dot. He had not called me Dot since 1986, and I had not realized until that moment, sitting on his side of the bed, in the silence, how much I had missed hearing it, how much of him I had been missing without ever letting myself say so. He checked on me while I was sleeping. He saw his yellow warbler, and his very first thought on the very last morning of his life was that he wanted me to know about it, wanted to share it, wanted me there. After 41 years, after all of it, after every wall and every silence and every unanswered doorway, his first thought was still me. That is who Raymond Earl Caldwell was from the day I met him to the day he died. That is who I spent 41 years not fully letting myself love. I need you to hear what I am about to say, and I need you to hear it like it is the most important thing anyone has said to you in years, because it might be. Love does not die from hatred. Love does not die from betrayal or cruelty or screaming or slamming doors. Those things are violent and visible, and people survive them and rebuild from them every day. Love dies quietly. It dies from silence, from the hand you do not reach for, from the doorway you never look up at, from years of choosing the armor over the person standing just on the other side of it. It dies in the moment someone gathers everything they have and asks, "Are we okay?" And you make them wish they never asked. It dies in words saved for a better moment that never comes, and gestures withheld until they stop coming at all. It dies slowly, without drama, while you are both still in the house, while the coffee is still being made every morning and the chairs are still being set out every evening, and the doorways are still being stood in, long after the person standing in them has stopped believing the door will ever open. Raymond set out my chair every single evening for years, never once withdrew the invitation, never once made me feel guilty for not coming. He was still setting it out in the last season of his life, still making my coffee, still checking on me while I slept, still writing my name. That is a love most people spend their whole lives searching for. I had it. I had it for 41 years, and I spent most of them standing just on the other side of a wall I built, myself, with my own hands, wondering why I felt so terribly alone. If someone in your life is still setting out your chair, go. Tonight. Not tomorrow, not when things feel easier, not after the argument settles or the pride fades or the timing feels right. Tonight. Set down whatever you have been using as armor. Walk toward them. Say the words you have been too proud to say. Take the hand that is still reaching for yours. Because one morning you will come downstairs and the coffee will be on the counter and the house will be quiet in a way that has no bottom to it. And you will say their name and the silence will say it back. And every single word you saved will have nowhere left to go. Raymond Earl Caldwell wrote my name on the last page he ever touched. He checked on me while I slept on the last morning he was alive. He called me Dot one final time into a voicemail I did not hear for 4 days. And every single one of those things, every last one, was him still reaching, still knocking, still leaving the chair out, still believing that someday I would come downstairs and sit in it. I did. I just waited 41 years too long. Don't you do the same. Go downstairs, right now. The coffee is still warm. If Dorothy's story reached something inside you that you haven't felt in a long time, something real and quiet and true, please don't let this moment pass. Hit that subscribe button right now and become part of this family. Every single week on the 11th Hour's Last Words, we bring you stories exactly like this one. Real, raw, human, honest in a way that almost nothing is anymore. Stories that remind you, before time makes the choice for you, what actually matters. Subscribe today. Share this with someone you love before you put this phone down. And tell us in the comments, what would you say if you found that voicemail? What words have you been saving that someone still needs to hear? Emotional withdrawal is its own form of abandonment. It happens in slow motion, invisibly, across years. Many marriages do not end in divorce. They end in silence while both people are still sleeping in the same bed every night. Unspoken pain does not disappear. It becomes resentment. Resentment becomes distance. And distance becomes the loneliest prison a person can live in. The small daily acts of love, coffee made just right, chairs set out without being asked, doorways stood in quietly, are the truest language love has. Reconciliation does not always look like a dramatic moment. Sometimes it is simply two old chairs on a back porch and the courage to finally sit down in yours. Pride is not strength. Pride is the thing that lets you lose the person you love while convincing you that you are protecting yourself. It is never too late to begin returning, but it can become too late to finish the journey. Go sit in the chair they keep setting out for you before the morning they stop.